far enough on that front. With us now are former International Development Secretary Andrew Mitchell and Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Alan Mendoza. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining us both today. Andrew Mitchell, if I could start by asking you first, do you think that Britain is handling this? Because there's also controversy, of course, about its handling of the way Saudi Arabia is handling the Yemen war. On both of those fronts, is Britain getting this right?
Well, good morning. The first and most important point to make is we need total transparency over what happened. I think we know to a large extent what happened in the consulate in Turkey, but we need to ensure we know who was responsible both for carrying out the operation and who ordered the operation. And only once that transparency is given can Britain and her allies make up their mind what are the appropriate steps to take in response.
Right.
As far as the much bigger
but are we
question
getting that? And are we getting that, Mr. Mitchell, do you think? Do you think we're getting that? The British at the moment seem to be saying that the alleged murderers in this case should be investigating the alleged crime. Is that good enough?
No, I think we're at a relatively early stage. We know quite a lot about what happened, but we don't yet know who was responsible for ordering the operation. And Britain, along with its allies, is pressing for full transparency on that point. But I want to make a wider point about what is happening in the Yemen at the moment, because Sky has covered the crisis there, the catastrophe that is Yemen today. And Britain needs urgently to move to a different position in its support for the Saudi coalition. We need to move to a position of neutrality. We need to use our status and position on the United Nations Security Council to effect change, and that change has to be a ceasefire, stop fighting and start talking, and that's what we need to see Britain championing today.
Alan Mendoza, you have been saying that although there are concerns about the Khashoggi case, Britain should not be severing relations with Saudi Arabia. But there are those who are saying that the support that Britain has given Saudi Arabia over Yemen is really giving a carte blanche to the government here to do what it wants. Isn't it time to suspend ties, if not to sever them entirely?
Well, with respect, we haven't even severed ties with Russia, and Russia has committed crimes on our own soil. The idea that we're going to completely sever ties with a country, even one which...
No, I said suspend, not sever.
Well,
is it time
as
to
well. We haven't
suspended
ties with Russia. The idea we're going to do so in the Saudi case is madness. Now, what I think is interesting about this is the despicable act has led to the Saudis coming under tremendous pressure from the international community. And you can see that pressure is already working because they've changed their story. And that to me indicates there's a huge opportunity here for us to actually exert influence and get the Saudis to change their style of governance and what they're doing domestically. It would seem to me that there is immense concern about their position in the world and standing in Saudi Arabia right now. And that creates the opportunity to say to them, look, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what you've done here. You need to effect a complete change in your attitude, and that will involve governance reform in Saudi Arabia more than anything else to make you a more normal nation. What has happened has proven that you cannot act in the way that you have been doing, and we need to change that. And I think Britain's in a good place to do that, given our influence and historic influence in Saudi Arabia.
Andrew Mitchell, is that possible, do you think? And going back to what you were saying earlier, is it in any way thinkable that this could have happened without Mohammed bin Salman not knowing about it?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think the international community is entitled to receive an answer. As I say, we're pretty clear what happened. We're pretty clear on who actually committed this atrocity. But we're not clear yet who ordered it. And I think once we are clear, and I hope very much the Saudi administration will give the world that fact, then we can take a calculated assessment of what it's appropriate to do. But I agree with Henry that with countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia and others too around the world, we need to have a constructive relationship, and we need to be candid when we disagree and set out why we disagree. And on Saudi Arabia at the moment, Britain's main relationship with Saudi Arabia, where we can have real effect, is in trying to get them to change the catastrophic policy they are pursuing in respect of Yemen, a country that is one of the poorest in the world, where the actions of Saudi Arabia, supported by Britain, are stirring up a man-made famine and the terrible consequences which will follow from that.
With you, Mr. Mitchell, for this point. I mean, he either ordered it, MBS, or he would have known fairly quickly about it. He's the defence minister. This is an absolute monarchy. Intelligence agencies all report to him. So if something terribly wrong went happened in that consulate, he would have been told about it fairly quickly. And yet he seems to have been happy for this counter-narrative to go on for 2.5 weeks, bringing a huge amount of diplomatic fallout onto Saudi Arabia, distancing itself from the rest of the world. Does that not cast a huge amount of concern about his judgment, if nothing else? If he's either complicit or he's inept, isn't he?
Well, as you say, he will certainly have been informed about it for all the reasons you set out in your question. But the issue for us is whether or not he ordered it. And it's upon that point, which I think the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia needs now to be clear. It needs to tell the international community whose misjudgment it was who ordered this vile atrocity to take place.
Mr. Mendoza, the truth really is just that deputy heads are rolling, isn't it? Isn't it an inescapable fact that MBS must have known about this at some point, and for 2.5 weeks has allowed a counter-narrative to continue that has done enormous damage to his country and his reputation as a reformer?
Absolutely. I mean, look, the crime was handled ineptly. The cover-up has been handled even more ineptly. The fact they're changing their story, which, by the way, is something that Putin would never do, in contrast, shows that they are feeling the effects of world pressure. But that gives an opportunity as well to make change here. It's an opportunity to say to Saudi Arabia, look, you've got problems. You've accepted you've got problems. We can help you address those problems and govern your country in a fairer and more effective way. What I will say as well on the Yemen case, Andrew has been very strong on that, and of course nobody wants to see atrocities there, but I think we have to take into account that here's a national security issue for the Saudis, and it's a national security issue because of the Iranian involvement on the other side in that conflict. Nobody can allow, not Britain, not Saudi Arabia, not the US, can allow Iran to gain control of Yemen. That is not a national security, international security situation any of us can tolerate. So whatever needs to happen there has to take that into account, that the Iranians are stirring things up on the other side and causing hostilities as well. So to get to a ceasefire situation will require significant intervention and to stop Iran from its activities.
And just back to you, Mr. Mitchell, just to give the last word really to the Khashoggi family, they want an international investigation. Is that something that you will be urging the Foreign Office to encourage as well?
Well, it may come to that, but for now, the information that should be put into the international public domain is known to the Saudi authorities, and we expect the Saudi authorities to come clean and explain precisely who ordered this operation and other related details. So I hope very much that the Saudi government will decide that is the right thing to do in these circumstances. If they don't do that, then I have no doubt that the Turkish authorities, who are in possession of very large amounts of information about what happened, will, I hope, bring it into the public domain fully, and then the international community, Britain, along with her allies, will be able to decide how best to proceed.
Andrew Mitchell and Alan Mendoza, thank you very much.